early 1900s, the Tulare Lake disappeared. Now, it's back. What's behind the sudden return, and what has happened since? The Tulare Lake, in what is now called California, was home to a series of tribes broadly known as the Yokut people. The lake was part of their creation stories and was central to everyday life, providing food, shelter, and a space to trade. But by the mid-1800s, California legislation had removed Yokuts from their land, subjecting them to violence through the California Native American genocide. The settlers who took over used this land to establish farms, and they made dams to divert the rivers that ran into the Tulare Lake. Without these rivers, the lake dried up. In the winter of 2022, record-breaking storms brought back the lake. The city with the worst of the flooding was Corcoran, which has housed 2 prisons for almost 30 years. The prisons were built in the 1980s to revive the city's suffering economy, turning the area from an agricultural town to a prison town. The city was warned of the dangers of building prisons so close to an unpredictable lake, but they were encouraged by the Department of Corrections to request exemption from state environmental law. Even though environmental hazards were clear, the prisons were constructed without infrastructure to protect them from flooding. Today, the 2 prisons remain Corcoran's largest employers, but as the lake expands, it's those inside the prisons who are the most vulnerable. When the flooding began, those inside received very little information about what was happening with the lake, and there was talk about getting moved to different prisons. Evacuation posed other threats, since many California prisons are old, poorly built, and already overcrowded. The uncertainty of where they would live created a climate of fear and powerlessness inside prisons. The plans for responding to climate change in prisons are questionable and often result from poor infrastructure. When summer arrived, the floodwaters receded, but the prisons in Corcoran faced heat waves that they were unequipped to handle. Temperatures in prisons were so high that the human body could not thermoregulate. When there are plans, they tend to focus on security, not for people inside prisons, but those outside. Incarcerated people are often used as resources during natural disasters, placed on the front lines to fight wildfires and floods. California has an especially high incarceration rate, and Black, Indigenous, and Latinx people are more likely to be put behind bars than white people. Prison infrastructure is a race-based issue, with the carceral system rooted in colonialism. What happened last summer in the Corcoran prisons revealed larger issues of how infrastructure can target certain groups and make them more vulnerable in times of environmental crisis. For now, the prisons are safe from flooding, but with the increasing volatility of the climate and few changes made since the flood, the question of infrastructure remains.